Join us in Omaha, Nebraska on Saturday, October 8th, 2022, as I'm proud to present Historic Haunted Heartland, a night of incredible true stories of paranormal phenomena, with not one, not two, but three paranormal experts alive on stage at the newly renovated and beautiful Benson Theater in the heart of Omaha. The fun starts with Omaha historian and paranormal investigator Jamie Nestrel as she reveals the true details on the dark history of Omaha. Next, Johnny Hauser, the longtime caretaker and nation's leading expert on the Villisca Axe Murder House. We're going to explore the crimes committed there with him and the history of its haunting. And finally, making his debut in Omaha, John E. L. Tenney will deliver one of his signature weird lectures. Tickets are available this summer, and I invite you to visit Necronomicast.com and follow the show on Facebook for more information. Historic Haunted Heartland, brought to you by Necronomicast, Saturday, October 8th, 2022, a night that could change your life or afterlife. From the historic Haunted Heartland of Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all, one and all, to this episode of the Necronomicast. My guest tonight for a late night conversation, boys and girls, Greg Lawson. He's a 30-year law enforcement officer, professional investigator, police academy instructor, college educator, expert witness for investigative procedures, and he also researches and investigates human paranormal experience and locations known for their spiritual or unusual activity. So join me and Greg as we talk about how to be a paranormal detective. Right here on the Necronomicast. And now joining us on the Necronomicast hotline from Georgetown, Texas, I've got the paranormal detective, Greg Lawson. Greg, what's up, man? How you doing?
Yes, you do. And I'm doing well, man. Thanks a lot for inviting me on here. It's awesome.
I had such a great time, and so did my wife, when we had breakfast with you and learned all the great stories that you had, especially your wife falling asleep at Dracula's castle. So
yeah, I want to go to Japan, and she's terrified of earthquakes and tsunamis. And I'm like, come on, man, you slept in Dracula's castle. Really?
Yeah, for real. You felt comfortable and at ease enough to fall asleep.
I know. It's just, she's like, yeah, I'm pretty much more scared of a giant tsunami getting me than Dracula. So.
Well, what a great honor to have you on the show, man. My wife got me your book after we met you. She got me your book for my birthday, How to Be a Paranormal Detective. And
she did?
She did. She
That's
did,
disturbing.
Man. No. It's a great gift, man. It keeps on giving. I was telling her as I was reading it, as I was, knocking out the chapters night after night, I was like, what a great book, because your talk, first of all, at the Strange Escapes was super fascinating. And I love the fact that you've got this incredible military and law enforcement pedigree, but just a great public speaker. And your book is just really full of really great information. So I'm just super impressed with you, and to have you on the show, man, what a treat.
Well, you and the other three people that read it seem to feel the same way. So maybe if I can
me, Jeff Belanger, and
yeah, and my wife. That's
and your wife. Well, there you go. That's all you need.
Yeah. She's like, I read part of it. I'm like, what do you mean you read part of it? She said, yeah, it's not that my kind of book. I'm like, wow, man, that's complicity and I don't know. I guess we're very comfortable with each other. Like, yeah, I'm glad you did that. I don't want to read it.
Now, I mentioned the fact that you are, military background, police background. For my listeners who aren't familiar with you, Greg, can you just kind of give me a rundown of your life history? Just what brought you up to this moment?
Sure, man. Of course. Got scared one time and thought, what the hell was that? And then I started looking for ghosts. I don't know.
Yeah, me too.
No, when I was 5, my brother was 12 years older than I, and he had a motorcycle. He'd throw me on the this is 1970s, of course. He'd throw me on the gas tank of his, Triumph 650 Bonneville. He's 17 years old, have his arms around me, and he would drive me around, and we would go and look for abandoned houses, buildings, and graveyards. That's what he did to me, and he scared the crap out of me. A matter of fact, just yesterday, I had to go into Austin for an appointment. On my way back out, I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if I can go find that. And I drove back to find the very first graveyard my brother ever took me to when I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I found it, and I walked around, and I took some pictures. And, the funny thing is he would take me and he would try to find the youngest kid in the graveyard. That was, like 2, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old. And then he would make up a story and tell me, oh, here's, so-and-so, here's little Johnny, when he was a little boy, just like you. I was terrified, man. Anyway, so as I grew up in elementary, junior high school, I did that to my friends, that hadn't had a big brother to torture them. So I tortured my friends. And up into high school, urban exploration and graveyards and stuff like that. And then when I went in the Army, I was a paratrooper with 82nd Airborne Division. We would get deployed different places. I was deployed in Alaska and Central America, the Middle East. And anytime I had any time off, I would go out into the indigenous population and go try to find the weird stuff there. And back then we didn't have, internet. So I had to actually go someplace and look at an encyclopedia to look up anything that was interesting in that area. And then I'd talk to the people and ask them about their legends and stuff like that. And I didn't realize it was a thing, man. I just was out there doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I did this for years. I'd have great stories about all kinds of different places. And then I get out and I go be a cop. I was a patrol officer, and then I was a mental health investigator for a while as an instructor at the academy. And then I went back in the military and did some more stuff in the Far East and the Middle East and, the South Pacific. And same thing, every time I was off in the woods someplace, off in the jungle someplace, looking for these weird things. And then I went back to be a cop, and, I've done a lot of different things as far as being a detective. I specialized in aquatic death investigation for a while. I'm an underwater recovery team sergeant was. And so I just have a lot of involvement with death and weirdness and stuff like that. And, and all of a sudden, 15 years ago or so, ghost stories went, or not ghost stories, ghost hunters and these other TV shows kind of went mainstream of something that I've been doing all along. And so I just have a different look at it than the average person who is, sorting fruit at the grocery store one day and then went and did a ghost hunt the next day. I've been kind of doing professional investigations for over 30 years. So that's kind of what brought me here. Was that a good enough thing for a 57-year-old roundup of my life?
No, I know. I love it. And what I appreciate about that is I knew all that kind of going on. I just wanted my listeners to get up to speed. But, I just think like when we're combining like paranormal and then like police procedures, when I think police officers and people in law enforcement, I'm thinking hard nose. I'm thinking evidence and science and just the facts and things like that. Like combining a profession that's all about procedure and techniques, like, forensics and, like even things like, I know you're probably not into arson investigation, but I mean, there's so much science and so much procedure and everything. And it just seems like sometimes paranormal, supernatural, anomalistic research might be opposite of that, since we're talking about ghosts and monsters, since police work is so into evidence and procedure. Is that a far stretch for you to be involved in supernatural and anomalistic paranormal research?
So I say no, because whether you're doing an investigation on insurance fraud or a homicide investigation or espionage investigation, you still have certain things that you need to do. If you don't do those things, you'll look incompetent, or you'll screw the investigation up. And if you don't do those things, people have to look at you and go, well, did he not do that because he just doesn't know? Or did he not do that by design? Because that's one of the things that I look for, even in a criminal investigation, is what is missing. People are always like, I need to find the evidence. I want to figure out what's not there, because that's what's going to be hidden. When you're doing an interview with a suspect, and they're giving you cues of deception during that interview, you don't just move on. You don't just go, hey, did you kill the guy? Did I kill the guy? I was raised as a Christian. Okay. The answer would have been yes or no. It's not the repeating, did I kill the guy? Or a distraction of, well, I was born a Christian, or I was raised a Christian.
Right.
Yeah. Christians hadn't killed anybody. I don't know.
Oh, so, pure as the wind-driven snow. Yeah.
Right. So, if you don't know, you don't know how to pick up on cues of deception. You don't know how to pick up on lies of omission or lies of commission. Those are only two lies people tell, is either they didn't do something or didn't know something, or they did do something that they didn't do, or know something that they don't actually know. Mm-hmm. Other than that, whatever you're telling people, it should be relatively factual. And so when you're doing an investigation, that's one of the main things is, 80% research before you go in there and actually put boots on the ground for 20% of the time and try to collect whatever evidence. So to get back to your question, is when I am gathering evidence, whether it's, like I just said, in a testimony form, or whether it's in a physical form, whether it's in a circumstantial form, there's all kinds of different forms of evidence. If you don't know the difference of the evidence, it's really hard to evaluate what that evidence actually is. And what you said is really the crux of the whole thing. Is what I'm doing is a methodical check the boxes. Did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? How did I evaluate it? What is it? And that's normal, right? But we're investigating the paranormal. So all of these groups that are trying to gather forensic evidence of the paranormal by default are not doing what they're saying they're doing. Because paranormal is other than normal. In a electromagnetic spectrum, if you're picking up something, on some sort of gadget that you have that picks up electromagnetic anomaly, and you say that that's a ghost, well, or that signs of a ghost maybe, or the spiritual thing that's there is disrupting whatever that electromagnetic spectrum is that you're measuring. That's normal, right?
Right.
Because it's electromagnetic spectrum. So you're not doing anything paranormal at that point. I think that's why using mediums and using intuition and using all the things that are outside of what you just described of what I do. It's outside of the logical evidentiary collection and identification. It's outside of methodology, because science is all about repeatability. And, none of this is repeatable. Human experience doesn't seem to be repeatable. You'll get 3 people to go into an area and experience something, and each one of them describe it differently. So is it the experience is really happening? It's just we're all a little bit different, and we our sensory perception, whether it be eyes, smell, all that stuff, is just wired in a little bit of a different way, and we isolate specific things that are important to us, or whether or not that anomaly isn't there at all, and we're just experiencing it psychologically all in our head. And it might be all in our head to begin with. John Tenney talks about that, right? You could see a ghost, you could see all these things happening in front of you, and nobody else can see it, that doesn't mean it's not happening. Just means that whatever it is that you're picking up on. And maybe it is all in your head and not out there for other people to perceive. But we can go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes on that one.
Oh yeah. And I got a ton of questions about, like, you're just firing off all this stuff in my brain, all these thought seeds. You talked about psychic mediums. Is that a form of evidence that you would lend some credibility towards? Like Cindy Keza, and she had an incredible gallery reading. I don't know if you were around for that part of the experience that we shared, but she did this gallery reading that, I was listening for, I'm not trained in interrogation techniques and everything. And I know what, when they talk about cold readings and things like that and deceptive techniques that some psychics use, but I didn't detect any of those things in my limited knowledge of those things. From her, she was hitting on things in the crowd that were very specific, and people were like raising their hand. And when there was audible gasps from the crowd, when people were, revealing things that were in conjunction with what she was saying. So psychic mediums could be something that you would use as evidence?
So that's a very good question. And typically psychic mediums are not accepted as evidentiary value in court.
Mm-hmm. Right.
However, I have consulted with psychic mediums in cases where all other forms of evidence have been discovered and evaluated. And the case has come to an end as far as any new information. So it's about to be a cold case. It's going to go in the file, and it'll be forgotten. And then 3 or 4 rotations of different detectives later, somebody will go, "Hey, what's in this file?" And they'll open it up and go, "Hey, he didn't do this," whatever the new thing is. Like DNA is a big thing right now that is exonerating a lot of people that are in prison.
Oh, sure.
And would have exonerated some people that were on death row. And it also identifying a lot of people. There was a murder that happened back in the just behind my house on I-35 is right over there. It's a famous case called Orange Socks. And Henry Lee Lucas admitted to that killing, and they ended up convicting him of that and a couple of different other murders also. Come to find out that he didn't have anything to do with it at all. And so nobody knew who Orange Socks was until I believe it was last year. They did a DNA comparison because they kind of advertised it and put the picture out, and one of her family members recognized her and contacted them, and they said, "Can we do a DNA?" And they did a DNA, and sure enough, actually identified her. So there's new things that come out periodically in law enforcement that really help us out a lot. But once a case is about to go cold and we have nothing, the question being ethically, does it hurt to bring in someone who professes themselves to be a medium to see if you can, solve this case? And I think it's a responsible thing to do for 2 reasons. One, what if what they're doing is real? What if what they're doing, they're somehow connected into the universe or into a spirit guide or into whatever it is that triggers these thoughts in them? What if that's real? And what if they could solve this case? Or 2, what if none of it's real? Yet I know this medium absolutely thinks completely different than I do. I've talked to them and everything, and they have a way. Everybody has their own little personality, right? Mm-hmm. But if somebody can come into your investigation that you are now incompetent with, you've done everything you could, you don't know what else to do. What does it hurt to bring somebody in and go, "Hey, can you help out with this?" To me, it doesn't seem like it hurts anything, because what it's going to do is it's going to have this person that has no, presumably has no police training, has no investigative training. And they're going to bring in their talents to try to think through this and solve this. And why not listen to them? I've had them come in on some major case. I've had two people come in on major cases that, what I did is I, shook their hand and introduced myself. We talked a little bit. I said, this is what we're going to do is we're going to get in a car and we're going to go to 5 different places. And I want you to do your thing at these 5 different places. These places may be connected with a crime or they may not be. I'm not going to tell you that. And later I will share with you, what we discovered. And so we move forward that way. So I don't say, all right, we're going to go to where we think that she was stabbed. We're going to go through where we think that, or where we recovered her body. We're going to go to, where we recovered this evidence on the side of the road. We're going to go, I don't tell them that. We just drive around and see what happens. And so I think it serves a purpose. If it's real, well, there it is. They're going to tell us some really good information that's going to get us closer to solving the case. Or if it's all bunk, yet they do think differently than I do, it might spur me on a new avenue of investigation. They might bring up something that I hadn't even thought of because I'm thinking logically and they're thinking emotionally in this whole thing. So
are psychics, would you say that they're a last resort in an investigation? I mean, you got to go through witnesses and you got to go through history and you got to go through, the accounts of everything that's happened. Would psychics
they have to be a last resort?
A last resort. What about like technology? Like, you watch all these shows and it seems like everybody's got a new gizmo or a gadget and something that lights up and something that beeps or a bear that lights up or, or something that
gremlin his eyes glow or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And these boxes, like, I've been on a lot of investigations, like group ones, like big group ones, and people have like these spirit boxes where they're pre-programmed with words and things like that. And I still don't understand how a ghost of an old man from the 1800s can manipulate a box built in 2021. Like I don't know if I can.
Well, if you don't understand that, I can't help you.
Yeah. I don't get all that stuff. I don't know if things are being invented and created just so they can sell boxes at $200 or $300 a piece, or if those things have some sort of, scientific weight or worth.
Yeah. So,
even EVPs to me, I've heard some incredible EVPs and I've seen some incredible photographs, but I've also heard EVPs. And I'm like, I don't hear that at all. And,
right.
And I'm not the be all.
Unless I say it first and then.
Yeah. Planting that seed.
Clear as a bell.
Yeah. Right. And I've done enough. I'm, got a musician's background. So I've done enough recording, of all kinds that I know that somebody could play me something with multi-track recording. I mean, I know forensically you can go through the data of when it was recorded and things like that. But still, when somebody just plays you something, I'm like, well, I hear a whispery voice, but I don't know, right. I am not a hardcore debunking skeptic. I think I have an open mind on things, but when I don't know how to validate people's evidence sometimes. How do you, like when you hear an EVP or, you see a ghostly photograph?
So when you have something like that, people say, I have evidence. Listen to this EVP. That's not tangible evidence. Mm-hmm. I don't know, you could classify it maybe as audio evidence, but it's still, it's not direct evidence. So it's something, we just don't know whether it's actually linked to anything that we're actually investigating. So to get back with what you said, are these machines that people are inventing, just gizmos that they're trying to sell to ghost hunters, or are they legit scientific instruments that are measuring the normal, trying to locate the paranormal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can look at the boxes, and if they look all old from the 1800s, but if they were built last week in some guy's grandma's basement, it's a magic 8-ball, right? And that's what it is. And so it's just a really cool. I mean, there's some cool ones out there, and I've wanted to buy them. I'm like, man, I want to buy that thing. It was $140. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't need it that bad.
Right. And I don't mean to, I know there's people listening that have those things, and I certainly don't want to come across as being a ghost hunting snob, or I have any kind of answers or any kind of advice for anybody on those things. I just have my own personal doubts, and I just don't. I'm free to admit that I don't understand everything,
Right. And I am right along there with you. I have no idea what this thing does. But when you purposely make it look like this antique thing, when you can go down to your, regular hardware store and some other maybe more technical computer stores that work on industrial type stuff, mm-hmm. and find the same equipment, but those equipment those pieces of equipment have manuals with them and explain how to detect things. Something that I like doing is if you're if people are using different detection type equipment, they're walking around and it's like, oh man, I'm getting all this, these readings. And I'm like, okay, look above you. There's fluorescent lights up there. Those lights have what's called a ballast in them. In order to make those fluorescent lights work, those ballasts will make your machine do that. Turn the lights off and watch what happens. You turn the lights off and all of a sudden we don't have that anymore. The rhythmic indications on some machines are, turn your phone off. And they turn it off. They're like, no, put it on airplane mode. Even then, you could get some residual out of there. So you need to turn your phones off in order to keep this stuff pristine and clean of whatever it is that you're looking for. So going back to what you were talking about as far as the spirit box, ghost hunting is incredibly boring. Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Spending all this money to go to Transylvania. I go into Hunadora Castle, or what's called Corvin Castle. It's the most amazing castle I've ever been in. Just crazy stuff happened there. And I go in there and I set up some cameras, set up some audio. I usually typically try to do digital and analog video and digital and analog audio. I don't use anything else. Mm-hmm. So if there's a spirit box or something like that, that's all somebody else's stuff, because I don't know what it's doing. I know what my analog and digital video is doing. So I will set that stuff up and let it run for whatever amount of time. Sometimes talk to the universe and try to see if I can elicit any responses or anything like that. But oh my God, it's boring out of your mind, right? And if you're doing it right, you're sitting there letting that stuff record. Now what has happened is, because we have such short attention span, it's like, we read or we, ask 3 or 5 questions of, is anybody here? What's your name? Why are you here? Are you trapped? Can we help you? Now let's listen back. And everybody sits there and listens to the audio. That's kind of the new thing now. So we can kind of move things along a little quicker. I really like the Estes method. If you're using a spirit box, instead of letting everybody hear the maybe football, because those spirit boxes are scanning either AM or FM radios just on a constant scan, and every once in a while they'll key in on a strong AM or FM signal and give you 1 or 2 words out of whatever they're saying on there. And the hypothesis, the theory behind it, is a lot of ghost hunters say that spirits on the other side are able to manipulate these frequencies and possibly communicate with us. I don't know where they're getting this information. It's a great idea and it's a great experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need people doing stuff like this. We need people doing all kinds of things. I always tell the cops that I work with, I've been doing it for over 30 years, so I'm a supervisor, and I always tell the guys, if all of us loved doing traffic and working traffic accidents and writing tickets, well, we wouldn't be finding the abandoned property under bridges. We wouldn't be getting good intel information about the drug dealers in the area because, you're not getting out of your car and talking to the people that are standing in their front yard waxing their boat or whatever. We all need to be doing something different. And hopefully when we, cast a broad net like that,
mm-hmm.
we're going to catch something that is credible. We're going to catch something. We're more likely to catch something that might make a difference. And if we were all just sitting there, just doing nothing but Ouija board, well, we would be missing all the other possibilities. So.
Sure. Now, what I really like about your book when I was reading through it, it is like it's a manual written with this law enforcement background, and you really detail how like these police techniques are used to and approached when an investigation is happening. Did you, when you were sitting down to write this book, did you see a need to write it as a way of being helpful, or out of frustration, the way the word investigator is thrown around? Because I am not licensed. I haven't done any law enforcement training or anything like that. And for me to refer to myself as an investigator, does that kind of like chap your hide a little bit?
It doesn't. No, I know. I know quite a few stay-at-home moms that watch Lifetime Channel, watch the Hallmark Channel, and are far better homicide investigators than people that I've actually worked with. They watch these shows, and so think about this. Traditionally, law enforcement, you go through let's say a 600 or 800 hour academy. In that academy, you're hitting everything all the way, from writing parking tickets to the difference between civil and criminal law to, drug offenses and homicide and stuff like that. Somewhere along the line, you learn who, what, when, where, why, and how, and for your interviews. And somewhere along the line, you pick up on certain things, but it's just a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very rare in law enforcement academies to actually do case studies of criminal events. And so they're teaching you this method to conduct an investigation, but they're not providing you the experience of how you apply those methods along the investigation. For instance, I do a lot of events all over the United States, some over in Europe. And the ones over in Europe just always boggle my mind because people have paid thousands of dollars to go to, let's say, Warwick Castle and investigate Warwick Castle with celebrities. And I'm typically not the celebrity. I don't think I am. I'm not sure what I am. But they're paying money to go with me and to go in there and do something. And they spend all their time looking down at their phone at some app that they loaded on their phone to find a ghost, right, or some machine that they've bought online somewhere or at a convention. They're walking around and they're staring at it. And my idea is put those gadgets away and have this experience, man. Quit relying on that stuff. You want to watch on TV them do things. Okay, that's fine. But that's the thing that really frustrated me was I watched some TV shows and I'm like, oh my God, this would have never flown had it been a criminal investigation, because They're either leading the witness. That's amazing as how they do research and they go there and they talk to somebody, then they lead the witness and kind of tell the witness the story. And people are like, well, these people wanted help. They want to do this. And that's why we're talking to them. And they wouldn't lie to us. Trust me, my friends. There's a case in Austin, which I wrote about in that book, the yogurt shop murders. Somebody went in before 10 o'clock or about 10 o'clock at night and murdered 4 teenage girls, stacked them on top of each other and lit the building on fire and left.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Grisly.
Over 40 people came forward to admit that they did that. So when you walk into the local restaurant in this town and go, hey, my name's Greg Lawson. I write about paranormal experiences. I've written 7 books on the subject. And does anybody in here know, what happened up there on the hill, that old house up there? There's dozens of people who go, oh yeah, I knew that. And, that's just what some people do, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really have to do your due diligence. It's like, all right, so you're conducting investigations. What academics do you have? Well, I don't have any academics. What books did you read about it? Oh, I didn't read any books. Well, how do you know about this? Well, I ordered this box and I watch this TV show. So that's what I go out and I mimic that, which is fun, man. Don't get all riled up on me. It's fun. I like ghost hunting. I like going into a cemetery at night and just walking around, not knowing what I'm looking for, but I'm hunting for something unusual. I like being a paranormal investigator where I research a legend and I go to that location and I walk around and I see if I experience anything unusual. I take it a step further above all of that. And like I said, to be a detective in this, to be really accredited, you need to go to some classes. You need to read a couple of books on specific things. And that's what I tried to do with this book. So I did it out of frustration just because I know that some of the things that are done in paranormal investigations would get exculpated. It would all that stuff would be kicked out of court if we actually were trying to prove the evidence that they're recovering.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, man, if I could write a book that maybe would help people to narrow their scope of investigation in a more productive and professional way, that's what I want to do. And I talked to Rosemary Ellen Guiley about that, and she's like, we need to write a book together. So that's where that book came from. We didn't necessarily do it together. I wrote it, I sent it to her, and then she took a red pen and bled all over it. Like, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? So she just ran me through the ringer on it. And we got it all worked out. And she ended up, we published with her publisher. And it's one of the best compliments ever to have Rosemary Ellen Guiley said, to have her say, this information needs to be out there.
Sure.
Paranormal investigators need to know this information. So my book is not the, how to be a ghost hunter 101. Here's your EMF reader.
Right.
It is, how do you really decipher what the hell's going on here?
Well, let me ask you this. Paranormal tourism is really taken off. And it seems like, yeah. And there's
which I've been doing for 40 years.
Yeah, right. And I love going places like that, the history really happened there. Like one of my favorite places is the Villisca Axe Murder House. I mean, there's books written about it. I mean, there is no question in anybody's mind it is a provable, true fact of life that those crimes happened in Villisca. So so you go to that place and you can stay there overnight, and whether or not you encountered the spirit of the victims or whether or not you encountered the spirit of whoever perpetrated the crime, you are in a place of history. You are in a place that these things happened, and you can walk around and not look at your phone, but you can walk around and experience this 1912 farmhouse, small farmhouse too. You walk around this farmhouse and you go into the rooms. You go upstairs. You go where the attic is. You can go into the cellar, the root cellar, or whatever they call it, the fruit cellar, root cellar. You can go in all these places, but paranormal tourism, have you ever had, and you've got a great bullshit detector from your law enforcement too. With paranormal tourism, do you ever get the person that's like, hey, come to my bed and breakfast and investigate it so I can tell everybody it's haunted?
So yes. It depends. Like, I've had that several times, and I tell them, I'm like, oh, okay, well, if you want me to, you have to give me your house totally for 24 hours. I get to stay there. If you're good with that, then okay. And there's only been a couple of people that have taken me up on that. Haunted Hill House up in Mineral Wells is one of them. Mm-hmm. And I stayed there for 24 hours, and it was as creepy, if not more creepy, than Hunadora Castle was in Transylvania or over in Romania. That's one of the places that I had unexplainable experiences and a bunch of good adrenaline dumps that were great. It was akin to skydive, and I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
And so,
what unnerves you? What unnerves you like that?
All right. So, in Mineral Wells at Haunted Hill House, it was a house that's about a block away from the Baker Hotel. The Baker Hotel's is a huge, very fancy hotel in Mineral Wells, which makes no sense at all. Because Mineral Wells is this little bitty town, and there's this ginormous hotel poking out the middle of the downtown, right? And they wanted to make good on the mineral water that is in Mineral Wells. And, they had a spa and all kinds of stuff. And it immediately failed. It was finished, and then the Great Depression happened, and it immediately failed, and it was back open, and then it failed again, and it's been sitting there vacant for decades. And people break into it and run around, damage it, spray paint it, do stuff like that. And what it was being used for or what was happening at that time is Prohibition was happening. And the men would stay at this hotel, and then they would go over to Hill House. And Hill House was a brothel. And of course, it was a brothel and a speakeasy. And so the legend is born. That's why it's haunted, is because, all brothels are haunted and all speakeasies have weird stuff. And that's just kind of the stamp that's given in a lot of these things is, this is the ghost is a woman in white that used to be a prostitute here. And she fell in love with some guy, and, whatever the story is, and then hangs herself in her room. Well, you do the research on Hill House. Well, obviously, you're not going to find a bunch of law enforcement stuff from that era, for the simple fact that law enforcement was protecting what was going on at Hill House at the time. So you can automatically assume that they weren't writing reports on disturbances and assaults and things that were happening at Hill House. But when you start looking at some of the death records, you look at the people that have died there, you identify that. You identify newspaper articles because, back in the day, cops didn't write reports. We testified. So we would book somebody in, sign their name, he's in on murder. And then they would set the trial up, and the cop would get called in, and he would testify what he found and what happened. It wouldn't be this big, long report written. Nowadays, there's a report written and a chain of custody of the evidence and all that sort of thing. And so you look at a place like that and go, okay, how can I prove or disprove any of this? Well, you pull the records of deaths that happened in Mineral Wells at that time and happened at that address, and there's 3 or 4. So you got, 3 or 4 people died here at the house, and then you start looking, okay, how do I figure out whether, all right, they said it was a speakeasy, so how do you know it's a speakeasy? And you start looking at the house. Well, this particular house, in the front room, there is a what looks like a fireplace, and it is not. When you go into the fireplace, you it's big. It's like, I don't know, 3.5, 4 feet tall opening. When you bend down and you walk into the fireplace, stand back up, you can take the panel out of the top. And there is a section of this house that nobody knows about. Well, I mean, they do now, but back then they didn't.
Yeah.
It's probably 6 feet, 8 feet wide. I don't know, 12 feet long, and goes to the ceiling. That's where they used to keep the cases of liquor in.
Oh.
So they hid the liquor in there, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then you're like, all right, well, this was most likely a speakeasy, because I mean, nobody has a house. Who builds a house like this? You know, the stairs look weird. It's like, okay, this is a 2-story house, but they modified the stairs here. There's something weird going on here, right? So you're looking at these different things that are going on. Anyway, so I secure the power to the house, and I go outside because I don't want any electricity in the house for me to do any of my readings or anything. I go outside and I take a metal detector and I check certain areas around the house, and I'm looking for anything that would be interesting. So I find a woman's earring. I find a knife that had a carbon, or not a carbon steel, a regular steel blade on it. So we know that it was made in the early 1920s or before. It was a really nice folding knife at the time. And it's still, you know, I mean, if you cleaned it up, it would still be a nice knife. Look around, and there's all kinds of jar tops and things like that. So I find this stuff, and come to find out that the earring and the knife could be related to a homicide that happened back there in the early 2000s. I'm trying to think of the date. I can't pull it right now. But anyway, there's a missing girl that was found dead. And there's pictures of her wearing earrings that look just like this particular one that I found. So you look at things like that, and okay, that was awful coincidental.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that does frustrate me about paranormal investigators is they're all things to all people. You know, they know everything. And it's like, you need to figure out what your bailiwick is. You need to figure out what you're really good at and be confident enough to bring in experts that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So bring in an expert to do this evaluation. And so I have a good friend of mine. I will use her name as Gypsy Jules. You can go on YouTube and look up Gypsy Jules, her metal detecting platform there. She's on a bunch of different shows. She was on Behind Oak Island, and I think that's what it's called, and some other things. Anyway, she is an expert at detecting metal things in the ground. That's what she does.
Oh.
So I call her up and I'm like, hey, I got this location up in Mineral Wells. If you get some time, can you go up there and just detect that property? And she's like, yeah. So a couple of weeks go by and she runs up there. And this is a long ways from where we live. She lives in Round Rock. I live in Georgetown. But anyway, she makes a run out there. And one of the most interesting things that she found was a cache of, it was a dump area. But anyway, she found little tin lids of 3 Widows prophylactics. And these are lamb reusable prophylactics from the 1910s, 1920s. I know you're frowning right now. Reusable?
Yeah, that's the part that stuck.
Yeah, you just wash them and just go again. So these 3 Widows, it looks like a skull can, except it's obviously not quite that big.
Well,
it's a little bit smaller than that. Yeah.
I know.
And anyway, so that falls in line with some other stuff that we found. That falls in line with, okay, this makes sense that it was a brothel and a speakeasy. I found evidence of both things.
Tangible, so real evidence there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're building a case on, does it make sense that there is paranormal activity at this place? So you're building on that. And that's just kind of a very, very small example of how these things go. I've had people talk really condescendingly to me. It's like, well, I have 700 investigations under my belt and blah, blah. I'm like, Jesus, 700? That's incredible. I have maybe 22 because I investigate it. You can't investigate 700 crimes. I mean, unless you're like a general crimes detective, a theft detective of, we have no leads and no suspects. Somebody stole my mail. Wow, I investigated that. Chalk one. I got one investigation there. And if I do, 300 more of those that year, I get 300 investigations, right?
Yeah.
Well, did you find anything? Did you solve anything? Did you get anybody indicted? Did you arrest anybody? So it depends on how you do your investigation and how thorough it is. You may have gone to 700 different locations and spent 4 hours there and done some EVP work, and you consider that an investigation. It's like, oh, okay. I typically do an investigation from beginning to end. I do everything I possibly can until I turn it back into a cold case.
Wow. Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's 22. It's probably more than 22, but I'm just saying I certainly don't have 700.
No, well, yes, I get what you're saying. 700 like nights in a plate, I spent the night or spent a couple hours in this one place and I recorded some stuff and then I'm off to the next place
I don't count.
I took some selfies, I don't count.
Right. I did a book called Diaries of a Paranormalist and it's kind of it's an essay form of things that I did different places. And so it's a bunch of short stories written in kind of essay form. And so, I was in Hong Kong and I always try to get it, when I was in the Navy, I tried to get away from all the sailors and jump on a hovercraft and go over to Lantu Island, which is the last place for Shaolin temple. And I wanted to go there. I'm interested in martial arts, did martial arts for a long time. So I wanted to go and experience a real Shaolin temple. And the big Buddha was under construction at that time, which is very interesting because that philosophy is all about minimalist and not being rich and, doing right for your community and all that stuff. And yet they build the biggest Buddha in the world up there and turn it into a big, giant, Disneyland tourist place. That was in the process of being done when I got there. Anyway, I spend a couple of days there at the temple. Then I take a taxi ride over to a fort that was constructed when they were doing. There was a lot of piracy going on, so they built this fort. And I wanted to go to this fort and go try to find the graveyard that is attributed to the fort. And so I go over there and I'm walking around and. This bird is, when I get there, this bird flies up and is jacking around in front of me, squawking and stuff. And I'm like, get out of here, bird, and it's a pretty bird. It was really cool, but I was like, all right, I'm here to look for ghosts. So I'm looking around and I'm there by myself. This is literally, I thought it was going to be like a tourist destination. I thought I had to buy a ticket and go look at it. No, this is just ruins on the side of this cliff. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm walking around. And I'm looking for a ghost, and this bird is beeping and chirping and jumping around in front of me and flying around, goes up in the tree, flies back down, jumps around on the ground. And I'm there for several hours and I check out the fort, check out the overlook of the ocean. This bird's jacking around. I go into the woods. I find what I think is a graveyard, had depressions there, and it would make sense. And this bird's beeping and chirping and messing around. And I'm like, wow, I didn't find a ghost. I didn't find anything, but this is really interesting. I'm glad I came. And I do my little, I had talked to a lady and she gave me this little ceremony to do while I was there. Cause I was there to visit the dead. And so the taxi driver came over and showed me how to do it. And we did it. And then we leave on out of there. Right.
Yeah.
Well, much later, I find out that the Earth Mother in Chinese lore sends a bird to you with a message. And because I was looking for everything paranormal instead of paying attention to the bird, I missed the message.
Wow.
So, It's a really weird thing when we're doing an investigation and we have this preconceived notion of what we're expected to find, and then we miss it all.
Yeah, that confirmation almost bias, right? Like when you're
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is.
Jeez. I know, like I was going to ask you too. That's a great story. I was going to ask you too. When I was a little kid, I thought my house was totally haunted because we would look at pictures that were taken from holiday parties, and my mom like, oh, here's the Christmas. We got them back from the photo mat and birthday parties and dinners and things like that. And there were always like these ghostly mists, and there's these shapes and weird artifacts in our pictures. And then when I got older, I just noticed that everybody back in the 70s smoked. And so that's what those were. And then I read about black mold and its effects on like human sensory perception.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And we always investigate like these old abandoned buildings that have holes in the roof and the rain's pouring in and things like that. Have you ever gone to a place and kind of witnessed something, or have you heard of people going to a place and witnessing something, but it turns out the explanation is the photograph is somebody smoking, there's carbon monoxide in the building and things like that.
So best examples of me, nobody can trick you better than yourself. Right. And I've tricked myself several times, and go back to Haunted Hill House, talking about that. I always fall back on this thing because I had several things that happened that were very interesting. But one of the things was I was walking up the stairs about 2:00 in the morning. I stayed up all night long and just walked around the house and sat and observed and listened and stuff like that. And every hour I would go to the different rooms and trade out my analog camera for a digital camera, an analog recorder for a digital recorder. And I was swapping them all in and out. And then I would go down to the kitchen, sit down and download everything onto my laptop. It was around 2:00 or so, and I'm heading up the stairs. And as you go up the stairs halfway, and then it turns to your right. Well, as you're going up the stairs, the hallway is to your right. There's a banister to your right and the wall to your left, and the front door is behind you. Well, in that hallway, to the right of that hallway is an opening that goes into the kitchen. As I'm walking up the stairs, before I get to the landing and turn to the right, a bright white light came out of the kitchen, like super like a star, right? Incredibly bright white light came out of the kitchen. And I turned my head and eyes to try to look at it, and it shot off. And I jerked around real quick to try to follow it, and it went out the front door.
Okay.
So it came out of the kitchen, went out the front door, and I had an adrenaline dump as good as a 15,000 foot skydive. I was like, yeah, that was awesome. What was that? Oh my God, it's incredible. That's incredible. That is what an orb should look like. Not these little freaking artifacts floating around in your, the dust reflections on your digital camera.
Right.
Which, anyway, so I was like, man, that was incredible. So I go up the stairs. I'm messing around up there, and I turn around and I'm walking back down the stairs, and something hits me in the back of the neck, like a BB, like somebody shot a BB at me. Right? It stung a little bit, didn't really hurt. It almost stung. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then I hear whatever the thing is hit the floor or the stairs and bounce a couple of times. What in the hell was that? Now there is a legend, a story of a child that died there, and a child did die there and is mischievous, and they will throw things at you, little things like pebbles and stuff like that. So that correlated with the story. I'm like, oh my God, so I go back, I get my metal detector, I get all my tools and everything, and I'm checking the wall, and I'm looking for where they've hidden, the blowgun, that they're shooting pebbles at people and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I look all through there, nothing. I can't find anything that would have launched this thing. And I look everywhere on the floor. all on the stairs and everything. And I can't find a BB, a pebble or anything. And I spent a good hour or so looking for this thing. So I go back down. And there was a couple of other things that happened with some doors opening and stuff like that that were pretty disturbing. And so I go home. A couple of weeks later, I'm in my kitchen, and this bright white light pops out of the sliding glass door in my kitchen that goes out the back door. And I try to track it like I did before. And I turn my head and I look, and it zooms out and it goes out my front door. And I get an adrenaline dump in my own kitchen. I'm thinking, I have an attachment. Something has followed me home. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. And then I thought, am I all things to all people, or do I need to call an expert? So I call my wife. She's a para-optometric. She works for an optometrist.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Call her. I said, hey, I got this bright white light that happened when I was up in Mineral Wells, and it just happened here. She goes, you need to come into the office. Oh. Why? She goes, you probably have a retinal detachment. And so I got in the car, drove to the office. They did a whole scan and everything. I didn't have a retinal detachment. I had ophthalmic migraine in my right eye. So, you know how your eye twitches and stuff like that,
yeah.
You know, when you're stressed out or don't have enough food or whatever, that can happen inside your eye also. And if you poke, just take your finger and lightly poke on your eye like that, you can cause, bright lights and that sort of thing to happen. And so that's what was happening with my eye. So it wasn't this orb that was flying out in Mineral Wells or in my kitchen. I had a condition called ophthalmic migraine. And which really sucks for me as a paranormal investigator.
Yeah, you got the
detective.
You just saw Bigfoot out in the forest. You know what
I know. I know. It sucks. But to be credible, I got to go, I hope it was a freaking, I hope I had an attachment and he followed me home and he's haunting me, but it's probably not.
Yeah, crazy.
But so, you have every bit of evidence. You need to evaluate it for what it is.
And call in the experts.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Quit I just don't get the whole, I don't know if it's like they just don't want anybody else on their deal. They want to be the only person that does this, but you have experts that do different things.
Yeah.
For instance, our underwater investigation that I did, that's very specific. Aquatic death investigation is incredibly specific, and it's hard for anybody to do it correctly. I can't even do it correctly most of the time because your medium is moving around. All your evidence is getting jacked with.
Yeah. Wow.
Constantly. And but the interesting thing is a majority of the murders that happened, like the turn of the century and probably prior to that, were with farming implements, namely axes and hatchets, right? So that was kind of the go-to for a lot of people is like, if I need to murder somebody, I got an axe on property. Everybody had one sitting over in their wood pile, right? They're everywhere. The interesting thing is I started doing this a few years ago. Whenever I have some time and I want to have some fun or whatever, I'll get my gear out and I locate bridges around Texas. And I'll go to the bridges, these old bridges, and metal detect under the old bridges. You find guns, you find knives.
Oh, I bet.
But that's one of the interesting things is I have several axe heads. Why would there be an axe head in midstream, very near a bridge? Well, it's because somebody freaking killed somebody with it and tossed it off there. There's no, in the Texas culture, what we do is we, do a rain dance or some sort of thing. I shouldn't say rain dance. Somebody's gonna get mad at me about that.
Yeah.
I do some sort of ceremony and then I toss my axe off for good luck or something, right?
Yeah, that does. Yeah, we know why
I'm
somebody's
pretty sure.
We know why
Yeah.
there's an axe head off the side of a bridge.
But that's crazy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this hasn't happened once to me. It's happened multiple times to me where I find physical evidence of, of what I believe was probably an instrument used in a murder. Because back then, you're not going to just throw an axe away.
No.
You're going to get a new handle for it if the handle's broke, or you're going to take it to a blacksmith and he's going to make something else out of it. You're going to trade it in. Metal is worth something, especially back in the 1800s or even older, whatever. So, these correlations of specific situations or evidence you may find or whatever, you have to dig pretty deep to kind of try to figure that stuff out.
Incredible.
Well, like in a situation finding an axe head, they didn't travel real far to throw that thing. So it had to have happened someplace around near that bridge. So you look around that bridge, as far as for records, anybody murdered? Well, there's no cop, reports on that. Where do you go next? Well, you go to the newspaper. Those guys were actually writing stuff, and you find most of your evidence from newspaper reports. The problem with that is they're so sensationalized back then, like today in many ways, to get, readers. So it would be, not necessarily all factual, but at least you would find out, so-and-so was found murdered with an axe, at this time and this date on this particular day. So you can correlate that and go, wow, maybe that axe went with that murder.
Or you'd even have to look at like missing persons too, because if somebody went through the trouble of throwing an axe off the side of a bridge, they probably buried the body or did something to clean it up. Yeah. And then nobody had cell phones and they can't digitally track. They can't find, nope. He went off to do the gold rush in California. I haven't seen old Joe the farmer in years.
That's right.
Bullshit. He's underneath your rutabaga farm. And the axe handle or the axe is in the creek down there.
That's right.
Crazy.
So that's kind of cool. Huh?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about ghosts and paranormal and things like that. Now you gave a great talk, great lecture, speech, presentation, and you were talking about like chupacabra and cryptids. And I know you have a book on Roswell that's brand new. So you're a well-rounded researcher or well-rounded investigator because you've kind of talked about all these things.
Well, I'm interested in certain things. So like I said before, whether it's a cryptid investigation or a UFO investigation or a paranormal investigation, the principles remain the same. The investigative principles and methods remain the same. So that's what I specialize in. People are like, oh, so you're a ufologist. You have a book out called Roswell, the After Action Report. I say, no. I'm a paranormal investigator that knows a whole lot about Roswell, so I wrote a book about that. And I went to it from a fresh perspective of a cold case and reflecting back on the actual people that we can prove were involved in it, not that just say they were involved in it. So that's the way I came from. And then I look at the investigators' methods that came to whatever conclusions they did, and the Air Force investigation of 1994 that resulted in the Roswell report, fact versus fiction in the New Mexico desert, which I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the Air Force is still hiding stuff from us. Their investigation was horrible. Yeah. The guys that did the investigation were probably good guys doing what they were told to do. I do not believe the way that they did their investigation. If you look at it from my perspective, I would have transferred all those guys out of there and put them on, stolen mail duty or something. But I believe that it wasn't through incompetence on their part. I believe that it had to have been.
Yeah, they had no choice.
Through by design. Yeah. They were told to do certain things because it is so overt, so in your face how they excluded specific people that were directly involved in the thing and just focused in, no matter what any witnesses said, to take them any other direction. They never went ever in any other direction other than the mogul balloon direction. And that's it. This one investigation was Sheridan Cavett. His wife is there. Mary is there with him. And Sheridan was the counter intelligence officer that went with the intelligence officer to the Foster Ranch to recover the reported debris that was left out there. And the Air Force investigators in 1994 are interviewing him. And basically, they didn't interview him. They just had a long, lengthy discussion about make sure that you say that this, didn't have anything to do with the extraterrestrials and it was most likely a balloon. The transcript is even edited. It's crazy. Anyway, Mary is sitting there. She goes, Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer that went out to the Foster Ranch and that opened up this case in 1978. Jesse Marcel was at the house and he had a piece of that material and they went and stuck it in the barbecue and it wouldn't even burn. And the investigator just goes, okay, well, anyway, Sheridan, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it doesn't even go down it was incredible. Incredible.
Oh my God.
They acted like it didn't even happen. Like, there's nothing to see here. Anyway, I'm surprised they left it in the transcript.
My God. And the name of this book is?
Roswell, the After Action Report.
Now, if my wife is listening, you know what to get me for Christmas or Father's Day. And
you know what? You had emailed me to send you one, and I absolutely forgot about it. And I actually have some real copies. So.
Oh, no. I think the email was like, how can I get the book that I already got for my birthday autographed? But I need to have you on again if you are willing. I'd love to just talk to you for another hour about Roswell and all that kind of stuff. That sounds.
No, I can't talk about that.
Come on, we got to get more than 4 people. What'd you say at the beginning of the show? Like 3 people bought.
Yeah. Get that 4th book sold, buddy.
Greg, man, what a great treat to have you on the show, man. It's been so much fun. I love the fact that not only are you super knowledgeable about everything that you've been talking about, but what a great way that you have a great means of like communication. You're just a great speaker and just the way you approach, you're just so approachable and, just so gentlemanly.
Did you talk to my mom? You talked to my mom, didn't you?
No, I did. I swear to God, I did.
She gets you to say that?
You raised a good boy, Mrs. Lawson. I got to have you on again. Is that cool?
Yeah, man. Anytime.
All right, cool. Everybody, I've had the pleasure of talking to paranormal detective Greg Lawson. And you can reach him at his website and all these wonderful books and everything that he's got at authorgreglawson.com. And we will link to it from the show page. Greg, my man, thank you so much for all this time. I really so appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it too. See you later.
There you go. At ease, everybody. That was Greg Lawson, the paranormal detective. What a guy, man. I had so much fun talking to him. And honest to God, probably the nicest guy that I've met in my travels, my journey through the unknown on the Necronomicast. Hell of a guy, Greg Lawson. Next episode, 226, features filmmaker extraordinaire John Dower. And John has made a masterful piece of work entitled Sophie, A Murder in West Cork. True crime, fascinating documentary on Netflix. So if you haven't watched it, head on over to Netflix and watch Sophie, A Murder in West Cork. And then join me and John Dower for a conversation on episode 226. Yeah, 226. Well, take care, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already left a review at Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do so. Take care.